Our Maimah wants to discuss the idea of the light in the times of Mashiach, the glory of Hashem that will be revealed at the times of Mashiach, which it says is without limit. Our question was, how is it possible that can be, because we live in a finite world. We live in a finite world. How can the light be revealed that is of infinite nature? The Rebbe then first suggested as a potential answer the idea of that perhaps the process might be somewhat in a similar sense as when the world was first created, that at the time when the world was created, what we call the Kav, the idea of the divine light that shone into the world and shone into the existence, it was the state of after Tzimtzum, and the Kav was totally withdrawn, so that there was no vestige of light that remained, because if there would have been some sort of infinite light, it would have been impossible for the world to have come into existence. Nevertheless, after they came into being, it became possible for the light of the Kav to be revealed within without their existence being nullified. So similarly, we might say that in the future, that the existence of the world would continue to exist if the infinite light came in again. The question, that was a supposition. We then said that this comparison is not a sufficient comparison. In fact, it's not completely correct, because the Tzimtzum itself and the Kav, which within it, caused there to be finiteness, and the Kav itself was non-infinite. So therefore, everything was created with the initial dimensions of having finiteness, even though it might be the infinite level of finiteness, but the level of finite still there. Therefore, we ask the question: how can infinite aspects, infinite dimension of Hashem, be in the same framework, or exist in the same framework, where the two with the two differing types of conceptual dimensions in it, the infinite and finite. We call the Kav Kotzer, and that implies to us, that tells us that the essence of the Kav is by nature restricted, since its own framework is one of restriction, of finiteness. So no infinite, something of infinite can't coexist in that realm. So now the Rebbe proposes somewhat a deeper idea within this. And by doing this, the Rebbe is teaching us a new and a deeper aspect which relates to the original creation by Hashem of the world. And even though we might not subsequently accept it fully, but in this teaching, in this section, the Rebbe teaches us a deeper insight into the original formation of the process of how Hashem formed all of existence. So it starts, Hine lechera efshel letaretz. So it's possible to answer, she'efshorius legili ha'or habligvul ba'olam hi, that the possibility of the revelation of the light, which is of the class of infinite, ba'olam, into the world, is possible because lefi shebe'emes ein hatzimtzum inyan hofchi legabo, Because in truth, the idea of contraction, the idea of tzimtzum, is not hofki, it is not in opposition in relationship to the kav. Now, this statement will be discussed a little bit further before we understand it a little bit more. And because the Rebbe now explains, Shariat Tzimtzum, because the process of Tzimtzum, Hoyerak Ba'er Ein Sof Gvul, because the process of Tzimtzum was actually only applied to the light which itself was finite. That is to say, the class of light which had or was created or will eventually create finite and introduce finite or finitude into existence. However, he continues, but the tzimtzum, but the tzimtzum did not or was not applied to the light which is of the class of Bligvul, of the infinite dimension of Hashem. So we need to understand that. We need to get a more understanding of this, and this is what the Rebbe. This is what the Rebbe will do further. But before we do that, we have to come and understand something, and we haven't said it explicitly, although we've certainly discussed around it, that in fact, in our realms of existence, we're acquainted with two types of interactions of Hashem. And although, as I said, we haven't said this explicitly in this moment, but we've certainly touched on these issues before, that in existence, the way Hashem created the world, there is the ideas of the light or the influence of Hashem, which permeates our world and becomes part of our world, becomes enclosed in our world, becomes internalized in our worlds. And when I say our worlds, I'm not just referring to our physical dimension, but even into the highest realms of spiritual existence. There is a light which we call Mamala Kol Almid, and that is derived from the level of the lights that we've been calling lights with the aspect of finitude. That is Er Gvul. Er Gvul means limited light. Now, if you use the expression limited light, this can also mean that it's of infinite nature, just will be the source of, or had characteristics embedded in it of finitude, of limitation. And as we've learnt, that after innumerable amounts of tzimtzum has been applied to the light, which we call the Er Gvul, limited light, and as I said, it's not limited in its sense if it carries the power of limit in it, because it comes from God, so therefore it can be infinite, but it carries the capability of limit in it. So therefore, after many processes of tzimtzum, it becomes limited. There is, in our discussions that we've learnt, and as explained in Tanya, right, another type of light, which we call Sovev Kol Alma. That refers to transcendent light, or the aspects of Hashem that we call transcendence. That sort of light derives from the which we call the Bligvul, the light of Hashem without limitation. literally meaning bli gvul, without limits. Now, in that light is carried the idea of transcendence. So what we've said now, or what we've said in the previous sentence, that the process of tzimtzum affected the light of which is the Eir HaGvul, but it didn't affect the Eir HaBli Gvul. Therefore, we continue with the Hebrew, V'hainu the Eir HaBli Gvul rak nis'alam b'mekeiro. So what did the Bli Gvul light, the light without any limit to it, that light is, as we said, unchanged by the tzimtzum. It was retracted and brought back to its source by Hashem, but that light wasn't affected by tzimtzum. It was merely withdrawn from revelation so that it could not be appreciated. But it hadn't been affected by the process of tzimtzum. And the tzimtzum was only processed on the light, which is the light which we call the Eir Ein Sof, which is the finite dimension of the Eir Ein Sof. And that's the one that eventually nishtana becomes and undergoes a change al yidei tzimtzum, through the processes of tzimtzum. And in fact, after that process had been applied and it shone and it was revealed back to the world, it is then known as the Kav. And so the Kav, as we've discussed, is the source of light which comes from the Eir HaGvul. We've also added that the Kav itself, sheneisef lakach she'amshachas hakav eina ela kav kotzer. So we've noted and we've mentioned that the Kav itself is in the Hebrew, kav kotzer, meaning a short light, meaning to say that it itself has now transformed into Eir HaGvul, a limited light. So it would be a light which has the unlimited quality of being a light of limitation, of restriction, of contraction. So it allows an infinite amount of finiteness. Continuing, Hine eid ze she'er ze nisamsum uvenase bechinas gvul al yidei tzimtzum. But this light, this Eir HaGvul, which is infinite by nature, via the tzimtzum process and its limitations, has been allowed to, become finite by virtue of the tzimtzum. And as an example of that, in the spiritual realms that we call Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, Val Derech Hamshochas Atzilus, Labri, Yetzirah, Asiya, the spiritual influences of the realm of Atzilus becomes stepped down in its intensity and then shines it into the world of Bria, which and the light in Bria gets stepped down in intensity to Yetzirah and Asiya in the three worlds, from the highest world, from the level 4 of Atzilus, to the lower levels, to a Bri Yitzir Asiya. Ki Yadua Shagam B'Briya Yitzira V'Asiya, also in those three worlds, Yeshna Hamshachas Er Atzilus, there exists the light of Atzilus there. Shari Yisavas Habriya Yitzira V'Asiya Hu Makecha Elakush B'Atzilus Davka, because the creation and the creating of the realms of Bri Yitzir Asiya comes from the power of godliness that's in Atzilus, which allows it to become formed. Yet, Elasha Er Atzilus Nitzamsum B'Bri Yitzir Asiya. Yet the light of Atzilus becomes contracted and becomes fitting and appropriate to become revealed in the levels of Bri Yitzir Asiya. Without that happening, we wouldn't be able to have these finite realms of Bri Yitzir Asiya. And if the light of Atzilus was revealed and openly connected in the realms of Bri Yitzir Asiya, the intensity of the light would be too strong, and the worlds wouldn't remain in their finiteness of their specific lower worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiya. And only the light of Atzilus is revealed in Atzilus, is manifest in Atzilus, but the light of Atzilus is not manifest, it's not revealed in the lower three worlds. So when we say, Sharia Inyan Shabbat Atzilus Ein Sof Lispashtose, and even though we can use the term that in Atzilus that has infinite light, it has Ein Sof Lispashtose, even though there is no limit to the expression of the attributes in Atzilus. But where does that apply? That only applies in Behu Rakba Medregas Atzilus Dafka, but that only applies in Atzilus itself, but not in the lower realms. Because Atzilus is in a realm of infiniteness, but it's a place where infinite and finite merge. On the one hand, it's still connected to the light from beyond it, but nevertheless, Atzilus is a place where the defined entities of the 10 spheres become manifest. But this is only in the realm of Atzilus. The way Atzilus exists in the lower worlds is in a limited nature. So that's why he continues. But that's not how it is. But the realms, the lights of Atzilus in those lower realms are not infinite nature. The infinite nature is not revealed. And this is all because and this is all because the light of Atzilus is fundamentally a light which came from Kav, which is finite by nature. And therefore its progressively greater symptom has been applied as it goes down B'Bri Yitzir Asiya. And a similar thing happens in the Kav itself, that as the Kav progresses from its highest realms to the lowest realm, it progressively loses, it has a weaker intensity, and that is why it's called the short Kav Kotsu. And it is Shehu Eira Gvul, and it is a limited light. V'liyesa gevul, and since it's limited in its very nature, nisamtsum b'yesa al yidei tzimtzum, it becomes even more pronounced since it already has the nature of being mitzamtzum. It becomes mitzamtzum even more through the process of tzimtzum. Now, all of that we have described till now, all applies to the Eir HaKav, which the Eir HaKav derives from Eir HaGvul, from the limited light. Amnon, however, Be'er Ein Sof HaBli Gvul, but the light, which is the original light of the Eir HaBli Gvul, Lo Shayachat Tzimtzum Al Yidei Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum does not apply and is not affected through Tzimtzum. Ki im she'al yidei tzimtzum rak nis'alam b'mekera, because the infinite light became withdrawn and concealed within its source. V'lochein gili erein sof habli gvul shebaha mitzvahs, and the Eir HaBli Gvul, the infinite light, which is in Shahamatzias Nishava Al Yidei Tzimtzum, Eina Iyan Shel Chiba Hopchim. Excuse me, I just mispronounced a word before, but I'm just doing it properly. Lochen Gili Erein Sof HaBli Gvul Bahamatzias Shenishava Al Yidei Tzimtzum, Eina Iyan Shel Therefore, when we talk about the revelation of the Erein Sof of no limits, which are in the existence in the framework of the world that's created through Tzimtzum, it's not an aspect of two opposites where there is infinite and finite. There's only finite all around. And Lefisha Tzimtzum Eina Shaykh Eilov Klal, because the Tzimtzum is not affected by that. So therefore, we have two dimensions which are not comparable.
Yeah.
The inyan bezer she'achibo hofchim hu kamei kriyas yamsuf. When the splitting of the Red Sea, the kriyas yamsuf, serves as an example when you have two opposites together, joining of hafchot, joining of two opposites. As the verse says, b'nei Yisrael b'seich hayam b'yabosha. The children of Israel were in the midst of the sea on dry land. Now, that's impossible. Haino shagam, in our physical sense, as he says, that while walking on the dry land, it's as if they were in as if they were in the middle of the sea. In order to do that, there had to be the fusion of two opposites, of yam, of sea, v'yabosha, and dryness. Two opposites are coexisting. The yam hu alma, now in a spiritual sense, if we transform those words into their spiritual components, the yam hu alma discussio. When we talk about the sea, that's a hint, or that's a symbolism to, or a proxy for, the hidden worlds, the things in the heaven. God, in a place of things where we don't see godliness, where we can't appreciate where we don't see the revelation of godliness. That's why we call it a hidden world. In the sea, looking from above, all you can see is water, but you can't see all the life that's teeming within the sea. when we talk about Alma Discussia, the hidden worlds, we're saying that the godliness is all there, but it's hidden, we can't see it. All you see is godliness. In the hidden world, in the Alma Discussia, everything is God, all the detail of it is hidden. All that you note is godliness. You don't see and note the differential independent existence of the fish, plants, and other organisms because they're not apparent. They're all subsumed in the godliness of everything, and that's what's understood. Godliness is perceived, and hence it's called the hidden worlds. While we live in dry land, continuing Hayabosha, who Amadis Galia, we live in the revealed world, dry land, where the animals and all existence there have got details, and those details tell you that, or imply to you, that they have independent existence. They become distinct entities. That is to say that we don't see the godliness in each one of those items. What happened at the splitting of the Red Sea is that the Jews were on the dry land. That is to say, they were on dry land, but they could see and feel as if they were part of the hidden worlds. They were simultaneously in the sea, so that the Alma Discussia, the hidden world, became open to them. And that allowed them to absorb this higher level connection and a higher level of existence, a stream of consciousness, of godliness. Nevertheless, they didn't lose their sense of individual identity that is characteristic of the Elam Discussia, of the hidden worlds. So the two opposites were in a state of existence. They were individual entities, but nevertheless, they could perceive the revelations of the hidden world. And this is a joining of two opposites. And that's what he says in the text, continuing the text. V'achiba de alma discussia im alma discalia. So the joining of the revealed world and the hidden world is a joining of opposites. And that's why this had to be a great miracle, because the two opposites coexist, and that had to be the influence of a very high level of godliness, as he says, a level which of holiness which comes from even above that. And how was that done? That is hinted at, that this level of high holiness comes from, in other places in the Chassidus, it says that it came from the, it says in the Chumash that the east wind blew all the night. In places in Chassidus, it mentions that the east wind, the Ruach HaKodim, comes from the level of Kadim, Kadma Shel Elam, the primary being, the Kadman, the one, Kadman means primary, so the being who is primary of the world. And so therefore this influence came from a level, in the text as he says in the brackets, Ma'alma Discussia, Ba'alma Discalia Dafka, from a level which is higher than those two levels. So you can have two opposites being joined together. Other places in Chassidus talk about the two ministers, minister of finance, minister of war. There are two opposite tendencies. The minister of finance doesn't want to pay for things. Minister of war wants to spend money, but in front of the king, they both fuse into one. Here is a case where where the two ministers fuse together. And in fact, this is so difficult. This fusion, the text continues, Mishum Zev, Kriyas Yamsuf, Haloshin Kosher. So therefore we use this idea that the fusion, when it happens, is so difficult that it is described as difficult. And therefore, because it's the fusion of infinite and finite together.
Yeah. David, is that okay? We stop here.
Okay.
Because this is too long.
Yes, it is very long.
We need to assimilate this better.
Okay. The point of our Maimah to say that this is the level of Kadmon means that this is a primary level, a high level of spirituality, which includes within it the aspect of dry and the aspect of wet, which are two opposites, right? Or within it, within the Kadmon aspect, it is in the state of potential, where everything can coexist. In this case, we have the sea, which is water, mayim, but it's also dry. The two opposites are contained in that. The same thing with the Jews. They're in the state of Alma Discalia, but also in Alma Discasia. They are in the world of Alma Discalia, the revealed world, meaning that they feel independent existence, separate, potentially separate from Hashem, and the details are there. At the same time, they perceive the Alma Discalia, the hidden world, where there's only godliness. They are two hofim, they are the two opposites that they're joined together. What can achieve that? That can achieve the godly light, which comes from beyond the constraints of Alma Discalia and beyond the constraints of Alma Discasia, the hidden world and the revealed world, from the level of Kadmon. The level of Kadmon is where all aspects have equal weight. They're all in that state of like comparative to, like in the state of Chokhmah, where they have the germ of the idea, where everything is in a nebulous state together, all is one, all merged together. They haven't been pulled out and separated out in their detail, but they can all coexist. So also that level of Alma Discalia and all Alma Discasia is coexisting in the same realm. What gives that capability to be able to exist together as in the same realm? That's a level which comes from the level of Kadmon, which is a level which is beyond Alma Discalia, the revealed world, and beyond the realm which is called Alma Discasia.
So the Kadmon is the level of pure cosmic energy.
A level of pure energy, but an undiluted energy, not
cosmic.
limited in a constrained fashion in their specific identities. So the next section of the Maimah will then speak about the fusion of the two opposites that every individual or that individual have within inside of themselves in some respect, right? Spirit and physicality, or in the highest level of tzaddikim, where we give the example of Joseph, who was prime minister. Nevertheless, he was a soul of very high spiritual realm. So there is also a joining of something together. But we will discuss it. We'll discuss more in detail in our next opportunity.